Welcome to the Spanglish Sports World Network on Zingo TV, channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app on the respective stores of iOS and Android, devices. Wow, off to a really good start with that one. When you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. Both apps are free, so you know what? Tell them what you think. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire and Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also all smart TVs 2016 and forward. Get it today. How we doing, everybody out there? Like I said, this is the Sports Den. I'm Scott Churchson. Alongside me is Obi Schottenfeld. Rob Stats is currently running a little late with the game that he's covering at this moment, which he referred to as a foul fest. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but I can kind of hazard a guess. And Jared might be a little late at this point as well because he is actually getting a COVID test. We are currently recording from, we're going to call it New Jersey. We can call it Woody Point, Newfoundland, Canada. It is a place that gets on average about 243 inches of snow every 12 months, which if you're in the New Jersey, New York area, feels about the same right now. Obi, how you doing, sir?
I'm good. The snow is not keeping me down. At one point yesterday, when the snow was coming, my son, who had at one point to choose between schools in New Orleans and Troy, New York, we sent him a text because he's in neither location now. He's in New Jersey. It's not snowing in New Orleans, and it's not snowing in Troy. So it hadn't gotten all the way up to Western New York yet, so we had some fun with that.
Awesome. Congratulations to him. Congratulations to you, too. It's good to know. And yes, trying to avoid the snow whenever possible. Like I said, we're digging ourselves out. I spent about 3 hours today, and I still got to go back and do it tomorrow. But you know what? We got a lot of stuff to go over today. We're going to cover Super Bowl in this case. I got a little bit of rant about going on about, New York Yankees, New York Mets as well, because they got another issue going on. We got an obscure sport we're going to be talking about a little bit. But you know what? Let's start off with the Super Bowl. This is going to be a first of its kind, limited attendance in this particular case. Possibly, we talked about last week, low ratings, because we're not sure how this is going to be affected. According to the latest poll, 72% of the population will not or does not want to attend or host a Super Bowl party, which is frankly the livelihood of the Super Bowl itself and the draw that comes from it. Budweiser just announced that they're not doing commercials this year, going alongside Pepsi, Coke, and Hyundai as well. So it's going to be a very interesting Super Bowl in a lot of ways, which is disappointing because on the field, I think it's going to be one of the best games that we have ever seen. And if it does not live up to being one of the best games ever, I will be sorely disappointed.
I think we are at one of these Super Bowls where on paper, we're looking at one of the best games, but I do fear that Tampa Bay's defense has the ability to turn this into a blowout. Unlikely, because we've seen what happens when you put this young Mahomes man behind the 8 ball. It doesn't seem to last long for you, but the potential is there, kind of like the Baltimore Giants Super Bowl years and years ago.
Yeah, 20 years ago on that one.
Yeah, where the defense was just so good that the offense is never, or even more recently, the Denver Carolina Super Bowl.
I was going to say Denver Seattle. The one at Giant Stadium or MetLife Stadium all those years ago. That was billed to be something great and ended up 43-8 and was over in the first quarter.
Yeah.
I think in this case here, obviously you got old versus new. You got, a guaranteed Hall of Famer going up against, at this point, a certified, most likely a Hall of Famer if he continues what he's doing. The ironic thing in this case here is that when Tom Brady played in his first Super Bowl, first of now 10, Patrick Mahomes was 6. Yeah, so it's certainly a case of handing off the reins here. But I think, honestly, Kansas City is probably going to take it. I will be pulling for Tampa anyway. I think they've got a real good puncher shot. It's going to be riding, like you said, a lot on that defense. JPP's having a good year. It's going to center around them being able to control this team and control this offense. Tom Brady historically has done well in the Super Bowl, but it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the first quarter. I came up across something a couple of minutes ago that I found interesting. In the first quarter of every single Tom Brady Super Bowl, do you know how many points combined Patriots have scored?
It's got to be 0.
3. You're close.
3.
Yeah. Wow. They got a field goal in the game against the Eagles, but they are notoriously a slow starting team. So it's going to be real interesting to see if he plays that same kind of a style. Where is he going to come out of the gate the same way? The fact that he has never led that team to a first quarter touchdown blows my mind. Because you think with the numbers and the scores the way they ended up, it'd be different.
I think you have a definite different offensive-minded coach here in what Arians brings, right? The whole issue with Brady this year is Arians just throw the ball deep philosophy, going to work with Brady, but it's going to give an explosive start to the Super Bowl. To me, I don't want to talk about the two big names as much. I think that I've already said the defenses are a big deal. Right now, Tampa Bay may be missing both of their starting safeties, which just means a world to operate for Kelsey. Kelsey could be the first tight end to win the MVP, I believe. The Bucs have the number one rush defense. That's, no one thinks of Andy Reid as a runner, but he is a strategic runner. He likes to at least establish the run enough to run some play action. But if the Bucs have faith in their run defense, does that mean they're going to just respond to passing? Antonio Brown might be missing. I don't think that's a big deal. I think people still remember the Antonio Brown who was the number one wide receiver with the Steelers. I think he's the fifth option on this team. I like Scotty Miller and I like Gronk more. But Watkins might not play. That's a big deal. And then the huge wild card, it's already come up, is COVID. We have two guys who were exposed to a barber with COVID. And how is that going to trickle down through these teams? They did not bubble up for the Super Bowl. And if it affects the game, it's going to, I think, be the biggest red mark against Commissioner Goodell of all the red marks.
I don't think it's going to affect it that much. I see your point. I totally do. But I don't think it's going to affect it as much as, in this case, these two teams have worked the entire year, despite the circumstances and the challenges of COVID, to get where they are. And both teams are obviously more than deserving. There's no, fairy tale team involved in either one of them. So I still think this could end up being a game for the ages. And frankly, again, I'll be very disappointed if it's not. I think the fact that it's played in Tampa is unique because it's going to give Tom Brady and the Bucs a much needed edge that I think will help a little bit because they're allowing 30% capacity. So the fans themselves are going, Tampa fans this year, I think in a lot of ways are Kansas City fans in the last couple of years, fans that desperately needed to get, to get a Super Bowl and to get some momentum going. Kansas City had it. Tampa's got it this year. I think that's going to help a little bit. I mean, right now, Kansas City is favored by 3 or 3.5. I've heard both of them, which I'm going to say probably 3.5 for betting reasons. But that's just the difference of barely over a field goal. A game this close. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the question becomes, when you say a game for the ages, I always ask, what does that mean? I mean, we think a few years ago when Goff was the young upstart, there was that Kansas City, St. Louis. Were they St. Louis at that point, or they were LA at that point game? Yeah. That was that was nuts, right? 47, I think 50.
Yeah.
But some of us still like that same season when they Rams ended up playing the New England. And it was 10-3. It was when good defense is playing good, it's not sloppy offense. That can be excellent too. So although I see this as being a tough game, a great game, two top of the half defenses, two top 5 offenses, two unbelievable QBs, wide receivers that are going to have Hall of Fame potential. The best, there's people have been talking about handing of the torch. Well, what about Gronk to Kelsey? I mean, let's
yeah.
let's not ignore that torch that's being passed here. So I agree, the potential for a great game is there. And all those things you talked about in the beginning about how the Super Bowl might not draw as many eyes. The flip side is those eyes it draws, the you and me's of the world, the folks who love the game of football.
Quality.
Should be enticed and excited and just, storylines, too many to count, and two teams that are just built to go. The only thing I would argue with is by the time Kansas City had won, they had been good for 4 or 5 years in a row. I mean, we're talking from Alex Smith. They were contenders. the last playoff game this team lost, the same quarterback matchup. Tampa Bay was claiming to be a quarterback away. And at times, Tom Brady has been that quarterback they were away. The other wild card is he's 42, and most of the time he plays like he's 35, 36. But he had, second half last week, you have to imagine that that's the second half he has. This game just goes away.
I think agreed. That's the big question. And he had some bad passes in a couple of the playoff games, but he's got, in this case here, 2 weeks off. So I think that's going to help him a lot. Cause again, he is, yeah, exactly. That shoulder right there, Obi's sitting there basically doing a little the shoulder to talk about the rotator. The 2 weeks will help, the added rest time will help the older farts like ourselves. And I think he will benefit greatly from that. I think if he wins the Super Bowl, I think he's done. I don't think he has anything else to prove in this case. He came here to prove that basically it wasn't all Belichick. And you know what? I think it's been made very, very obvious by the fact that he took this team to a Super Bowl and Belichick's watching it from the sidelines, that it really was him in this particular case. Again, like I said, it's a 3.5, so it's really, really, really close either way. But before I get into that, give me your thoughts. I mean, give me your predictions, take a couple minutes, give me some thoughts on what do you think is going to happen with this as far as like the score goes? Is it going to be close? Give me your thoughts.
So my prediction is going to be that nobody else is going to get tagged on COVID. And one of the safeties is going to play for Tampa Bay. So that's what's in my mind. I think it's going to be close for sure. I would take the dog and get my 3.5 points. But I don't think it's going to be super high scoring. I'm liking 24-27, 24-28, right in there. I just think the defenses are both being overlooked because they're not the cool storylines. Todd Bowles is already proven to be an amazing defensive coordinator, good enough to get a job as a head coach once. So, I mean, the other storyline that we haven't talked about is both of these all four of these coordinators aren't getting a job. When's the last time both Super Bowl teams, all between them, the four coordinators, did not get a job the next year as a head coach? That is a little odd for sure.
Yeah, the Jets are certainly possible that way. There's a lot of there's a lot of openings right there. You did mention, it's funny, you mentioned Jared Goff before. That trade. You know what? I got to tell you, if you're Detroit, you got to love that trade. I mean, you maybe downgraded a little bit from that standpoint, from the quarterback standpoint, but you've got a quarterback who's been to a Super Bowl. You've got a ton of draft picks in the process. I mean, my God.
Yeah,
can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Now we can.
Okay. Yes, I'm in COVID-19 protocols. I'm on location right now. I'm at NJIT.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm loving the background there. It's the best background I think you've ever had. I figured, when you popped on, I figured you're probably still at the stadium. I mentioned something at the top of the show.
Yeah, no, it's as soon as we wrapped, they lost 75-71, and I was like trying to get on. I'm like, okay, and then I was like, wait, I can't take my mask off.
Dude, actually, it's a rocket look. I'm digging it. Yeah.
I look like I'm about to rob the bank.
You're as handsome as
like
ever.
Obi was saying, it's I guess you guys are talking about the Super Bowl. I think it's going to be high scoring. I think it's going to be like 30s, 40s. It's going to be one of those wild shootouts. The Detroit trade. Detroit fleeced the Rams. But I talked about this online, I think with Obi and on Twitter. The Rams haven't had a first round pick in like 7 years. Like, they don't know what to do with a first round pick. They're like, no. This is going to confuse us. We're better drafting from the second round on. So it's going to be interesting to see how it affects the Deshaun Watson trade, because in the one way you could look at it as like what they got for Stafford really shows how like the Rams aren't expected to have high draft picks. Granted, Houston wasn't expected to have a high draft pick this year, and Miami's got the 3 pick now, but the Rams are projected to probably have in the 20s again, and it just shows you how much value there isn't in that pick in the 20s. Whereas if the Jets or somebody wants to give up a top 5 pick, Houston may not have I don't think Houston has the leverage to begin with. I think they're trying to climb out of the grave that Bill O'Brien dug them into. But even now it's like, well, we're giving you this pick. This pick is worth so much more than what the Rams gave Detroit. So don't expect a lot more than maybe 1 or 2 picks, where before they were expecting to get the Kings ransom of like 5 picks, multiple first, multiple seconds. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And it is interesting too, like you said, there's no Super Bowl coordinator is going to be getting head coaching jobs, out of this year too. So
with that Rams pick, I think, it's 2 firsts, but it's not 2 firsts. It's a first for the player and a first for taking that salary. So I still think that you look at Watson, you say, okay, I can get 2 solid first rounders for Watson, whatever they're going to be. And if you're talking the Jets, maybe you take Darnell. You don't take, you say, all right, we'll take Darnold. We won't take this year's first, because it's the only way Watson will move is if he knows he's going to get that lineman, and then take 2 firsts further down the way. I mean, that's another factor that weighs into the Watson deal. Watson is going to drive down that price, because if you take too much from that team, Watson isn't going to be willing to go with his no trade clause.
There was one person on like one of the New York talk shows here who called in, and a fan said, he goes, this was when they were projecting multiple firsts and seconds. And he said, why would Deshaun Watson want to come to the Jets and end up in the same exact position he's in with Houston? Like they said, and we talked about this before, like when it comes to trades, don't get caught playing checkers with a team that's playing chess. And look at the Brooklyn Nets. Everybody thought the Rockets were in rebuild mode. And before the ink dried on the first trade, they had shipped LeVert to Indianapolis for Oladipo. And it's like, they're not rebuilding. Like they're going to be competitive. They may not win the West, but they're going to be a playoff team. Yeah. And it's the same thing. Don't sell the farm. And like, because if I'm Watson, I'm like, why am I going to come here? Your offensive line's worse than the one I was just playing behind. And you probably don't even, the receiving core is questionable, and you don't have the running back. So it's, don't sell the farm. And if I'm Watson, I'm like, man, you better take a pick and a player and be happy. But there's people who don't think he's moving at all, which I wouldn't be surprised. I think they're going to be like, no, you're either coming here and playing for us, or you're not playing for anybody.
I was going to ask how you felt about New England, possibly.
I heard Stafford was like basically told the Lions anywhere but New England. I don't think he goes to New England. A lot of people are now kind of realizing too, the Texans, why would you trade him in conference? They're saying like maybe San Francisco, maybe the Bears. But again, what are you going to give up? And what are you going to have to, what are you going to get in return? And what's he going to be going to? So San Fran is a very enticing team if they can get Jimmy G in return and maybe a pick. So we'll see.
And I got to think if you're Watson, you'd be okay with the Cowboys, and then you can get a pick. And if you're Houston, you get picked back and you get Dak. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, let's not forget, before he went down, Dak's numbers was looking like the MVP. It's and speaking of Dak, in the end, there's been a lot of talk who was the best quarterback in that draft, Scott, Wentz, and Dak. All 3 of them could be on new teams next year. And that just, what did that draft really mean in the end with that? Especially all the draft capital that was traded to get the first 2 guys, whereas Dak goes in the many rounds.
And based on my theory, it's Dak, because the other 2 were taken in the top 5.
That's a sound argument. Like what you paid for those 2, the amount of money you had to pay for those 2, Dak was a better person to have on your team.
So cool. So a little bit more to cover on this. Did actually uncover some odd sports bets for the Super Bowl, because every time you have the Super Bowl, you always get those weird circumstances where, what is the coin flip going to be? Will there be a safety call? In this case here, some of the ones we don't have to bet on in this particular case, but what color will Miley Cyrus's hair be like for the tailgate party? Current win is right now blonde or white. The dark horse on this one is purple. Will Tony Romo correctly predict an offensive play?
Yes.
Yes. 130 will get you 110, which I think is a pretty safe, one of the safest bets you're ever going to get there. Bet 1,000 to get 550. Will LeBron James's name be mentioned during the broadcast? I think that could be the easiest lock of all of them too.
How would it not?
Yeah.
Especially if a fan gets thrown out of the game for some reason. It'll definitely be mentioned after last night.
Oh boy. Yeah. After, in this case here, can Tom Brady be heckled? Can he get away? Can he force a fan out on the Super Bowl?
What do you got next?
2 more. Will the Weeknd be seen with sunglasses on his face? 100 will get you 140. Now, I'm old. I had to look up who he was. I'm at that point kind of now, It's like basically, I remember when they had like Roger Daltrey and, Keith Richards and, and Mick Jagger. But now I had to look up. It's like, oh, he's only 30, But yeah, that one. And lastly, the last one we have here is the player to pour liquid on a winning coach. 50-50 split defense offense. So I would say defense on that one, just my gut feeling. But
it's usually a defensive player who does it. Yeah.
Because the offense is in winning.
Yeah, the offense is usually on the field taking the knee, so it's usually one of the linebackers or something.
Which in this case here, if Tony Romo says they're going to take a knee here, that technically counts as correctly calling an offensive play, which means if you bet yes, you win that bet.
He may get it wrong. You know, he might predict they're going to call a fake. They're going to try to draw you off sides and then take the penalty instead. Watch Kansas City go for it.
Can I point this out? I hate that. I understand the rationale. I understand the thought process. And 1 out of like maybe 10 times, it does actually work. But the other 90% of the time, it is boring as hell because you're sitting there waiting to see if they end up doing it. And the defense, most of the time, unless it's like a Giants defense, they're just going to sit there, just kind of like know what you're going to do. They'll wait the play out, because very, very rarely, if you ever notice that they try, if a team tries to get the defense to jump on a 4th and say 1, they never snap the ball anyway. And it's to me, it's boring. It really slows the game down.
That may have been – that's one of the key reasons Kansas City's play worked, right? The defense was literally on its heels, making sure not to jump. And then, boom, I got to get 1 yard. And there it is. The space is right there when the defense is already off by that 1 second that it takes to snap the ball. Yeah. We don't see enough fake spikes in the NFL either. That should be a play that's run like every season. At least one team should run a fake spike.
Yeah, they never do that anymore. It's a good point.
Yeah,
the Dan Marino play, famous. I mean, I've only seen like 2 people. Didn't Rodgers do it a couple of years ago too?
Yep. It happens every 4 or 5 years, but it should happen every year. It should be done every year. At least one team should be trying it, especially if you're a bad team. Like, why are you not trying that one?
Well, you could, if you want to, go back in time to the 1990s Giants and Dave Brown, by the way. Remember that name from, when Dan Reeves was coach, and they did a fake shotgun pass punt. On 3rd and 17, they had Dave Brown punt.
Oh, pooch punt.
What's that? Oh, yeah. And it went like 10 yards. And I'm not talking 10 yards from the line of scrimmage. I mean, it went 10 yards. Oh, God, that was a terrible Giants team. I missed that.
Let me take you back to when you were a child, when Danny White was a punter and the quarterback for the
Yes, for Dallas.
Yes. So that pooch punt happened a little more often then, because it was, the same guy doing it. So,
and how do I remember the name Danny White most? Because I have Tecmo Bowl in my NES Classic, and Danny White's the quarterback on Tecmo Bowl.
Wow!
Yeah.
Wow!
Got that for my birthday a couple years ago. It's the game I play the most of all the games that are on there.
We got that for that's the Bo Jackson version of Tecmo
Bowl. Yeah, Bo Jackson and then everybody else.
Yeah. So we got that for my son, and I'm like, I'll be LA.
No, nobody has to be LA ever. Because you got Bo Jackson, you got Marcus Allen, it's done. Yeah.
Bo Jackson, you called the play, he'd still gain 5 yards.
Yeah, and Family Guy did a bit about it. But all right, so we're about almost halfway through at this point. Find us always on Spanglish Sports World on Facebook and SSW Spanglish Sports World Sports Den on Twitter. I want to talk a little bit at this point about some Yankee and Mets at this point, baseball. I never got to my little Yankee rant, which has now been added at this point. Last week, I wanted to vent angrily, and honestly, I'm still livid about this. This is a team I'm really livid about. They traded in division to your biggest rival, arguably the biggest rival, arguably one of the biggest rivalries in all of sports. For second trade in 23 years. You took one of your best relievers and sent him to Boston to free up cash. A guy who was looking for a rebound, a guy who was, basically had the motivation and the drive to show that last year was not a bad year. It was in fact just an anomaly year. Grew up in the New York area, grew up a Yankee fan, and just got traded to the rivals. You know what? Honestly, you couldn't find another team to send him to. San Francisco wouldn't have been an option.
If I'm the Red Sox, I'm thinking one of two. Like, first of all, I better re-sign this guy before he goes back to New York, and they beat me for everything. But two, I'm sitting there thinking, does he have a tell that no one knows about? Like, is he tipping his pitches? And, the Red Sox pitching coach is probably looking at film going, okay, what are you throwing here? What are you throwing there? Do this. Because now it's almost like a mind game of yeah, we'll give them to you. And you're thinking, why? Like you said, it makes no sense in division. Like, why are you doing this? Like, what's wrong with him? What do you know about him what habit does he have that we don't realize that you're about to like take advantage of when we bring him in relief later on in the season?
Yeah, and it's like I said, you send it in division. The last time a trade happened, I mean, the Yankees got Stephen Drew, and that honestly never amounted to anything because that guy was barely over, I think, 180 as a hitter with the Yankees. But if you go back further than that, they got Mike Stanley back because Mike Stanley was a popular player with the Yankees. They let him go for Joe Girardi. Jorge Posado's on the way up. And then they got Stanley back in the 97 season. So that was the last time any player of real relevance, I guess you can say, was traded between the two teams. And the fact that they traded Ottavino, again, a New York guy, to the biggest rivalry that in sports, blows. I don't get it. It was a cash dump. But the Yankees, are they really in a position right now where they had to do that? You let Tanaka go, which is another thing I'm going to get into in a second here. You pinned all your hopes on a pitching staff that outside of Cole is very questionable. I don't like this team this year. I'm terrified for this team this year.
So the only explanation I have as an outsider to the Yankee world and someone who feels no remorse whenever they do anything even slightly dumb is that, yes, this is a drop, a salary dump, because they know what they're going to go after when we get to the trading deadline, and they want the money then. It's the only thing that makes sense to me. Yeah, I'm a little bit with Rob that there must be something about him that they know either whatever they've worked on to make him better, he won't learn. He's not coachable. This is as good as he's going to get. There's a tell, whatever that is. But the other thing is we're going to need somebody later, and we're going to free up the space now with these guys who are willing to take them, and then later we're going to go get what we're going to get. And then the other thing is, Bauer's still out there. As long as Bauer's still out there, Bauer's still out there.
Bauer's not coming to the Yankees. Again, that rivalry that he has and that, the animosity that he has with Cole. And plus, I don't think his personality on Twitter matches what the Yankees really want someone to be. There's been talk about Trevor Bauer possibly going to the Mets, but after the Mets basically they fired their GM and now their former manager is now in sexual misconduct allegations going on.
He was just suspended about 20 minutes ago by the Angels, right before the show.
Unsurprising, very unsurprising. But Callaway,
there's like prerequisites. I'm thinking because remember a couple weeks ago, jokingly said, I go, who's left to fire next season was the owner, and now it's like, oh, the Mets want Trevor Bauer. How much GameStop stock is that going to cost them? It's like to own the Mets, you have to have some questionable financial dealings of some sort in some manner. Like you were either part of a Ponzi scheme or now you're part of this whole Robin Hood debacle. But
and the funny thing is, their last owner, Wilpon, had a problem, like you just said, the Ponzi scheme. So their entire team was reflected on the fact that he got owned by, through this Ponzi scheme. When I was a financial advisor, I came across one Ponzi scheme in my time, and I saw firsthand what it did, to this family in this particular case. And in this, it was okay because the guy only dropped like 25 grand, but it's not the end of the world. But I saw this kind of stuff and what it does to the economic aspect of a family, not to mention in this case, an entire sports team. So now you got Steve Cohen, who's embroiled in all of this going on. You're just fired your GM. Your former manager who got you to the World Series a few years ago has been suspended by his current team because of this conduct that's going on. I mean, we say it often, Mets got a Met, and I think Trevor Bauer may be looking at this and kind of like, no. I think this might be the nail, in the coffin that drives him away.
Yeah, it's going to hurt. This whole thing is, and for Met fans too, they realize that Cohen's not really the billionaire next door, that he's a billionaire. It's a business. Everything's going to be about business.
He's not a Mark Cuban type.
Yeah, he's not that type of guy. And right after it all happened, I was working a game at FDU and their play-by-play guy, he's like, yeah, one of my friends has worked for him for years. And he's described him as one of the most cutthroat person he's ever met in his life. So yeah, the Mets gonna Met. It's like they made the Lindor trade. They took that one big step forward, and then with Porter and now the whole GameStop and Robin Hood fiasco, it's like they took two giant steps backwards. So it's the Mets gonna Met.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're still going to do pretty well on the field. There's talking of like a 154 game schedule. The current thing, the last thing that I knew of, they're going to start a month later, but ended a week later. So the World Series will probably be ending, or may very well end again in November, which is something I always disliked anyway. But they're talking again, universal DH. They're talking double headers that win 7 innings, which I love that idea. I think that adds so much drama to a game to have a 7-inning game. I loved so many aspects of that. Again, I'm a fan of the universal DH. I know people hate me for it, and they've told me so, actually. But I think a lot of those decisions are being made. The fact that it is now back down to 14 teams are going to be going in the postseason this year instead of 16 like last year will make it harder for a team like the Mets to get in. But I think they've got enough on-field talent. I think they can pull it off this year. I really do.
I don't know if they have what it takes with the universal DH, if they have that extra bat that they're going to need to play that. But I also wonder, I've heard it proposed a few times with the universal DH, when you change your pitcher with universal DH, and I don't know if this is on the table or if this is just talk to talk. And when you change the pitcher, you either lose the DH or you have to change a position player as well at the same time. So you have to do the double switch or you lose the DH to add strategy back into it, because, the American League and pitching at this point, the statisticians are winning by a long shot when you have the DH, and then they deserve it. They've worked hard and so they've gotten to the point where changing pitchers is just, with the 10-day DH, 10-day DL and everything, it's really become like a shooting gallery for pitchers. So to change something up like that, I kind of like that idea, even if it's not for this season, but when we go back to 162. You're
talking with starters though, which it's now at this point, it's a 5-inning, 6-inning game for most starters.
Right.
Where back when we were growing up, it was 8, 9, sometimes 10 or 11 innings,
I like the idea of the 7-inning double headers. That's a college rule, and it gets the game to go a lot faster too, and it's going to save pitchers. Like if you get a good pitcher who can go 6 innings, you can just bring a closer in, and it's like you save the middle of your middle relievers, and it'll extend your bullpen a lot longer as well, especially in like 3 or 4 game series. Or, I mean, obviously they probably won't play doubleheaders in the postseason, but if you get backed up and because of rainouts and things like that, like having the middle relievers in the bullpen, not having to go to them in a doubleheader because your starter went 6 or 7 is going to be a big relief.
The only small rule that I don't like about it is in a 7-inning game, it still requires your starter to go 5 to get credit for a win. I'd like to bring that down to 4, but powers that be will decide one way or the other on that particular case. But if you remember last year, and you mentioned your great point here, if you remembered last year during the postseason, there were like 5-6 games straight with the schedule, and there was no off time, and those were 9-inning games. So again, you worry about the strength of the bullpen and how long they can ride that particular situation out. Now with the new rule, of course, being that relievers have to throw, either to the end of the inning or 3 batters, that's also changes a little bit of the dynamic, which again speeds up the game a little bit. We talked about it a few weeks ago. The game has slowed down, and I think it hurt the brand a little bit seeing that kind of a thing. If we want to really talk about stupid, weird oddities, and I've had this conversation with other people, it'll never happen, but I'd like to see something equivalent to a power play in baseball, where whatever happens, you make an error, for example, the next half inning, you have to pull a player out of the field and you're running with 8. It's one of those things that'll never happen, but imagine the dynamic of how that would change if you have to decide if you're going to run with 3 infielders or 3 outfield, or 2 outfielders. And a catcher has to be in there, so you can do something with that. But stupid little rules like that, I'd love to see changes like that just to see what it does.
Well, I mean, they're doing it on the offensive side, right? When you get too far in the extra innings, you put a man on second.
Mm-hmm. Which I like that rule too.
They're already trying those different things. And, baseball is a game that has a stodgy reputation because it doesn't want to try new things.
It's tradition, yeah.
Yeah, because the numbers are the numbers, whatever. But you do need some things to make the game a little more interesting. I think baseball suffers in 2 ways. I think with the young kids today, I think it suffers in 2 big ways. I think number one, it suffers because it feels slow. But I have to wonder how many other people are like me in our generation. My kids are not big sports fans.
Mm-hmm.
But on top of that, the history of baseball is marred for me. I happen to, the best players I've seen, we just watched, they're not getting in on shot number 9. The 2 best players I ever saw not going to Hall of Fame. And in another year, they will not be in the Hall of Fame. And it puts, the numbers are the numbers, but the guys I saw who I watched aren't good enough for your numbers. Like I have to admit, there's a little bit of angst and anger in me towards Major League Baseball. And it's not even them. It's a bunch of writers, no less.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you have a father like me who's less likely to push their kid to watch the game. And the kid's already going, this game is slow. So, yeah, you have to baseball needs a mixing up that's going to draw in new fans, that makes it exciting and new. And the way to do that is create bizarre rules, whatever those rules may be.
And not just change your uniforms and have, different styles of this sort of thing. I mean, okay, that's a nice touch. But yes, something like that can add a little bit of punch back into the game. Hockey suffers for the same reason right now because scoring is difficult. And I think for, fans of sports that, of like football, basketball, where you have multiple points being scored, it draws greater attention. You can't have a 3-2 pitching match, or something like that and draw people in. I think that's part of the problem with the World Series.
Or you have to know how to advertise it in a way that makes it, you have to learn how to make a pitching duel exciting. And I think that comes from guys in the box. Look, soccer does not have a lot of scoring, but I can watch a Spanish broadcast of a soccer game, not understand a word, and enjoy it more than an American broadcast. We don't have the right broadcasting team. Baseball doesn't have the right broadcasting teams to make a 2-1 game exciting.
Are you saying that the current tandem that's been doing the World Series for the last decade and almost decade and a half, that we need a little bit of a shift on that?
They're just as dodgy as the game. That's what I'm saying. Yes.
Yeah. He is saying flatly Joe Buck sucks.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I'm not even saying that. I am saying he's from an era that is related to the game that needs to be changed to get new fans.
But he's not that much older than we are.
He's not, but he's just not. The problem with him though too is like people hate him. Like,
yeah,
if there's a good comparison. Like people didn't like Chris Collinsworth on Sunday Night Football, but they warmed up to him. Like they found a groove with him. Joe Buck's never found that groove with his audience because he's always out there trying to create something. Like, and it goes back to like when he did the football game in Green Bay with Randy Moss. I mean, Troy Aikman basically doomed. And Aikman's his broadcast partner for the NFL games. It was when Randy Moss did the fake moon to the Green Bay fans, and Buck went bananas. He's like, my kids are watching this. This is crazy. And then next week, Obi, you probably remember this because it was a Philly game, and I think it was Jason Avant scored a touchdown, like mocked pulling his pants up and tightening his belt. And on the air, Troy Aikman just turns and goes, hey, Joe, you want to say anything about that? And there was dead air for like 5 seconds. He had nothing to say, and people were like, Troy Aikman just murdered Joe Buck's career. This was like after Artie Lang went on his short-lived HBO show and just destroyed him there. So he's always been the butt of jokes, and he's never really – Artie Lang kind of buried him too with like, you're only here because of who your dad is. Like, you're not really that talented. And I'm not saying he's not I know he's not the best. In my opinion, I would take Gary Thorne. I would take Brent Musburger, so many other play-by-play guys over him, but he's a company man. And he obviously does what he has to do to get the gigs, and he keeps coming back, and they keep shoving him down our throats, and people are just tired of it. Like, and then you see somebody like Romo come in and you're like, this is entertaining. I'd rather listen to Romo than listen to Joe Buck.
Yeah. It feels like to me like he's bored. That he's doing it more out of an obligation than a desire. I mean, Bob Costas was asked about what is the best thing that he ever wants to do. He said World Series, because the anticipation and the drama between every pitch. And if you go back to the 99 World Series, Yankees Braves, that was the last time that it was not done by Joe Buck. And you listen to him do that, and you can see he still had that very flat personality, but it drew you in. It gravitated you to what was going on, because there's just such an underlying energy that's happening, And I think with Joe Buck, the problem is that he doesn't have that energy. Just like I said, it feels like he's there for the paycheck and not the passion. And I think he's better at football, because I think that soft personality that he has can be offset by the action on the field. But when you have that soft, quiet personality going up against, or alongside a soft, quiet sport, it's what's causing a lot of the issues to go on. I mean, last year, again, this was COVID. Nobody was going out, sure. But last year, every single game in the World Series set a record for the lowest TV ratings of all time. Games 1 through 6. They did not have a single game that broke. They had one game that barely broke 10 million viewers. The year before, when the Nationals beat the Astros, every single game broke 10 million, and their worst game on that World Series was better than the best game from last year. And it's because of the fact that I think people are just bored. So yeah, shuffle it up, do the power play thing, maybe have a 2-strike, start out with 1 strike or 2 strikes to a strikeout kind of a thing.
And more sponsorships like Taco Bell, steal a base, get a free taco.
Yeah. Give them some kind of an incentive to watch and say, okay, I'm getting free eats. Your team scores 7 up.
In the NBA, team misses 2 3 throws against the Sixers. I got a free Frosty from Wendy's.
Perfect.
Just back-to-back, something that's going to happen. Back-to-back strikeouts, you get something. Now you're rooting for that pitcher to have a pitching, a moment of great pitching.
I mean, a lot of the teams do that in general. I think every time the Mets, scored 6, they got, you get like a free pizza from Papa John's or something like that. But yeah, it's something to expand the brand a little bit and get people more interested. When we were growing up, I mean, you were an anomaly if you had cable, and cable was 33 channels. Now there's so many different options, so many different streaming services. It's kind of like, well, why would I want to watch that? I have 177 different things I can do right now with my time.
Yeah.
So awesome. So we got ourselves about 10 minutes, about 12 minutes left. And I think, I don't know about you guys, but I think it's time to talk about a little bit of bizarre sports. What do you think?
I think we're ready.
I think we are definitely ready. So this week we're highlighting a Malaysian sport, which allegedly has been around since about the 15th century, but that's unconfirmed. It's called Sepak Takraw. And you know what? I love this. I think this is one of the coolest sports we have ever talked about on this show. I personally would love to do it. And yes, I'm giving away my hand as far as my grades go, and I'm okay with that. This thing is cool.
Well, this is exactly the type of sport. And this is definitely a sport that I love to get the chance to highlight. It is obscure, but it's not necessarily ridiculous like the others we've highlighted. Yes, I'm looking at you, outhouse racing.
Pumpkin racing, yeah.
And maybe give me a little hand on my obscurity scores here. But America has a federation. Supposedly the best. There's 2 places the sport is played a lot. One is the Asian Olympics, and the other is this King's Cup. And America has finished first in 2018 in the smaller 2-man version of the game, and third in 2019 in the full 3-man version of the game. So I was excited. This is a great sport, and glad that we can bring 2 more people's eyes on it. 3 more. We're 3 here today.
Exactly. But let's explain it real quick because I didn't actually do that. Imagine volleyball rules where you have to basically score 21, best 2 out of 3, pretty straightforward there, except soccer rules as well. You can use your head, you can use your feet, you can use your knees to keep it in the air, just like volleyball. No hands. And you know what? You look at some of these players here, and there's a definite martial arts skill to a lot of this, and it's really cool looking. I would love to do this. Rob?
I described it as, what did I describe it as? I said volleyball meets hacky sack meets kung fu.
Yeah.
That was the best way to describe it for me. And I had actually seen it before as someone who played volleyball. I've seen clips like people have shared because they're like, oh, check this out. Like, you played volleyball. What do you think of this? And it's a really entertaining, like, exciting sport to watch. And it's the one thing I was watching the video Scott sent us too. And it's the one big difference too is like where volleyball, you can't touch it. You can't play it twice, consecutively. You can in this, like, you can make the first, save, and then you can set the second ball up first, make the second pass to your teammate to go over the net.
I mean, again, you're still limited by, 3 times, it has to go over by the third hit, just like in volleyball itself. But yeah, the net's a little bit lower. It's badminton size. I think the level in this case. So it's a little bit lower than traditional volleyball. But yeah, dude, I think I would love to set this up. I'd love to find out if Jersey's got something like that.
Absolutely. That'd be great. So yeah. You mind if I start with the scoring process just so we can
be my guest.
Rank the sport here?
Be my guest.
All right. So oddity and stupidity, I gave it a low score, D, and that wasn't an insult. Volleying sports are ubiquitous. There are many games, including football and hacky sack, where we do use our hands, and volleying in soccer is an incredible skill. You see the greats always showing it off. So the fact that they're combined is not particularly surprising. So I did not think it was really odd or stupid. Obscurity, again, a low score. I gave it a D. After I've done all the reading, this is the highlight of the Asian Olympics, apparently. Mm-hmm. And the Asian Olympics is not a small continent in any way, shape, or form. So for us to say it's obscure, that's just our eyes not getting on it. And like I said earlier, it's great for us to be able to highlight this for those folks out there. Playability, enjoyment, this is a solid B. Does require a level of athleticism and coordination I probably don't have. I may not enjoy landing on my back as much as I want to, but I'd certainly give this a shot. I don't think this would be a lifelong activity at this point, but would love to play it once or twice, especially on the beach. Watchability, I came down to a C based on just how often I watch volleyball and other volleying sports. Unless I have a rooting interest, I don't, when the next commercial comes, I go to the next thing. But if I had a rooting interest, or I knew the Jersey team was playing and the U.S. team was playing, I would watch the whole match without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean they're not the Riveters in this case. Rob's new favorite team and all the.
Oh Jesus, yeah! We'll get into that. I like the Jinx. They withdrew from the Isabel Cup because of COVID-19 testing.
This is your fault for calling me the Jinx so many times.
I know.
And you know what? Turnabout's fair play.
Yeah, I'll give you my scores. Yeah, I thought I didn't think it was a stupid sport at all. I gave it a D for stupidity. It was not dumb at all. Oddity, I'll probably give it a C because a lot of people probably don't know about it. The normal sports fan probably doesn't know about it. But watchability, I could definitely. If it's an Olympic event, it's probably more watchable than a regular sporting event. Like I said, that's probably one of the reasons it's probably so popular in the Asian Olympics is because it's. If they're doing it every 4 years as opposed to every year, every season. But it's the one downside would be the playability is Obi said, it's not just hand-eye coordination, it's hand-foot coordination. It's martial arts. If the video we watched, you see the guy like a volleyball player tipping with their hand, he's going up and he's switching feet in the air and doing these bicycle kicks and tipping the ball with his back foot when he's faking with the front foot. I'm oh, this is and they're they put it in slow-mo so you can actually see it and appreciate the skill that goes into it. I'm this is I loved it. It was one of the oddity sports or obscure sports that we have picked. And I was I'm totally down with this. If we made this an official Olympic Games for this year's Olympics, I'd be oh, I'm totally watching this. But yeah, and it's like I said, playability is just it requires a specific skill, but definitely enjoyability is an A for me. And overall, I'd probably give it a B+, A- overall. Nice.
For me, stupidity, if A is incredibly stupid and F is not stupid, I'm giving it a D-. I think it's a really clever idea. I think it's a really cool idea on this. I don't find it stupid in any way, not like some of the other sports that we've covered up until this point, outhouse racing included, as you mentioned. Obscurity, this is a bit of a misnomer. I'm going to put this as a C because here in the U.S., again, it's not a sport we created, so we don't really pay a lot of attention to it. But in Asia and a lot of other parts of the world, even Europe, a sport like this is pretty popular because, again, it's simple to play. It doesn't require a lot of work involved. And it's, like you mentioned, more well-known over there. If it was in the Olympics, that would probably help the U.S. audience a little bit. Playability, yeah, you're right. This is a tough one to play because of the fact that you are very capable of hurting yourself. I would, like I said, I would totally give this a shot. I'd probably flail completely and miss because I would probably just do some flying kick just to be able to hit it, land on my hip, break it, and I'd be done. But at least I tried. That's the important thing. They say trying is important. So from a playability standpoint, it's probably closer to a C-, I think, because the average Joe would have a hard time with it. But watchability, yeah, like you said, if this was an Olympic sport or something high level, you see what the Olympics looks like, for example, with ping pong, and you see what it's like and how fast they move. And then if you take that level and put it into a sport like this, put it into seatback takraw, and you see what these guys have been doing, working as a cohesive unit for years against other cohesive units, you are looking at probably one of the best things that YouTube could probably provide for you. And I would totally watch that. You know, I'd much rather watch that than like dressage. And we've been down that road before. You know, but yeah, no, I love it. I think it's a great sport. It was just one of those things that I just happened to just stumble on it when I was talking to you guys yesterday about, you know, what sport to cover in this case. And that was literally the first one that came up, and I'm like, yeah, sold, done. So cool. So we got about 4 minutes left at this point. We're almost to the tail end here. Give me your final thoughts. Obi, give me any final thoughts you got. Upcoming Super Bowl. I mean, I'm predicting 35-31. You said it was lower scoring. You said 27-24. Any final thoughts from you?
I'm going to drift away from the Super Bowl and talk about high scoring. And I'm going to quote somebody else here and say the only way that you can score in a basketball game like the Nets is to play the Nets. Watch them, see if they learn some defense. If not, they may not make it to the NBA championship against both the Bucks and the Sixers team that have some good D going on.
Yeah, they what did Kyrie say the other night? I played so bad he couldn't guard a stick. I was like, yeah, this is what happens when you trade away your best defensive players for James Harden. So this is, you know, it was Jay Williams, the former Duke player and Bulls player, was like, he was calling them the greatest big three in league history. And I'm like, yeah, you better walk that one back real quick. Like, you better moonwalk it back like at Michael Jackson. Like, there was the most overhyped statement, you know, premature evaluation of anything basketball related in probably the last decade.
Well, they're still currently in third place at 13-9. Again, being the East, being what it typically is every single year, you can get in at 500 or lower, you know. So the East is not like the West in this case. They could still get in with 35-40 wins. It's plausible.
They'll be a playoff team. They'll make the playoffs for sure.
They're in that top four discussion with the Bucks, the Sixers, and the Celtics. It's just, and they probably have the best offense of those four teams. It's, can they stop anybody for 4 games, no less? It's going to be fun in the playoffs because it's going to be high scoring.
Yeah, you know, but right now, you know, for 76er Nation, good for you guys. You know, it was a struggle for a lot of years there, I gotta say.
Yeah, it was nice to beat the Lakers this week. We had a little party.
Fair. And obviously in this case with LeBron and everything that happened there, you know.
Where did he throw the fan out last night? That was in Atlanta?
Yeah,
it was.
He threw the fan out in Atlanta. That was pretty funny. The woman was on social media, but it's funny. She actually said, she threatened to like F him up, like beat him up. And I was like, well, that's why you got thrown out, because I'm pretty sure that's a clear violation of the NBA spectator code of conduct. Like, you can't threaten to assault somebody. So
yeah, heckling is allowed. Violence is not, or threat of violence is not.
When it comes to LeBron, go for the hair. Just make fun of that hair.
Fall back like your hairline, LeBron.
Hey, be nice. You got better hair than we do.
Obi's got the best set of hair on the, you know.
Obi does, yes.
On Spanglish Sports World.
Rocking this thing down here. So, but anyway, that's good. Rob, do you have any final thoughts?
I would just like to, I'm mourning the end of the Riveters season. I apologize for being the jinx, but I'm glad I didn't go out and buy the cutout, because then it'd just be rooting for other teams. So
that's true. And let's keep, basically, you got a couple pictures for social media on that, you know, Rosie the Riveters, some props there. Nice jacket, by the way, NJIT basketball down there. Yeah. Well, I told him at the beginning of the show you were covering. So anyway, this show can be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. Please check out spanglishworld.ca for all the news and programming. That is going to do it for us. On behalf of Mr. Rob Stats and Mr. Obi Schottenfeld, this was the Sports Den. I'm Scott Churchson. Tune in next week. We're going to be talking a lot more about the Super Bowl, the outcomes on that, and also giving our review of the 5 most defining moments in sports for us, in our opinion. So
that we've seen live or on TV, in person, or on TV.
I've got a few in my head we're definitely going to be covering at that point. So yeah, so live, why it meant something, you know, TV, why it meant something, just our top 5 on that. So that's going to do it. Have a great night. Thanks for tuning in. Take care.